inflation? Their view is as long as there's excess capacity and unmet needs, et cetera, you're not going to have inflation because there's a lot of slack in the economy. That's a legitimate debate. But they say when inflation happens, raise taxes. By the way, they also say you don't need a tax system because if you can just print the money, why do you have to collect taxes? And their answer is, we collect taxes to redistribute income. Okay, well, at least they're honest. I mean, that's kind of a socialist model, but they're honest about it.
Raising interest rates has no impact on the supply side shortages we're seeing. And that's where the inflation's coming from. Since the Fed has misdiagnosed the disease, they are applying the wrong medicine. Tight money won't solve a supply shock. Until the supply shortages are fixed, higher prices will continue. But tight money will hurt consumers, increase the savings rate, and raise mortgage interest rates, which hurts housing. Treasury borrows money by issuing bonds, and the Fed monetizes the bonds by buying the bonds and then gives Treasury the money to pay the bills. So why not just give the Fed the money? Why not do away with all that bond facade? Ex-lawyer, financial commentator, and author Jim Rickards has arrived here via a 50-year career at some of the most famous financial institutions in history and has thrown some light on the Treasury bonds, inflation, and the federal. Let's get into the video.
We need a bond market, U.S. bond market. We only have a bond market as a favor to investors because it gives them a place to put their money. But why have, you have government spending. So the Treasury borrows money by issuing bonds, and then the Fed monetizes the bonds by buying the bonds, and that gives the Treasury the money to pay the bills, et cetera. She says, do away with all that. Just give the Fed, wire instructions for Lockheed. And if you need 5 F-35 fighter jets, order them and just send the money right to Lockheed. Why do you need a bond market? I mean, she actually says that. So, okay, legally, that might be possible, but to suggest that you can do that without consequences is nonsense. And then you say, what about inflation? Their view is as long as there's excess capacity and unmet needs, et cetera, you're not going to have inflation because there's a lot of slack in the economy. That's a legitimate debate. But they say when inflation happens, raise taxes. By the way, they also say you don't need a tax system because if you can just print the money, why do you have to collect taxes? And their answer is, we collect taxes to redistribute income. Okay, well, at least they're honest. I mean, that's kind of a socialist model, but they're honest about it. But it's important to bear in mind that Stephanie was the principal economic advisor to Bernie Sanders in 2016 and 2020. And Bernie Sanders today is the chairman of the Senate Budget Committee, controls the purse strings. So coming out of Congress, and Biden's kind of a cipher. He's barely aware of his own existence. So Sanders is in a powerful position, and she's the Bernie whisperer, so to speak, who's behind all this. So if you ask the typical member of Congress, can you define modern monetary theory? They'll look at you funny. They've either never heard of it or they certainly don't know what it means, MMT, But they're acting in accordance with modern monetary theory. Whether they know it or not doesn't matter. That's what the Fed does is kind of nonsense. But when it's fiscal policy, not monetary policy, and you're handing out checks, that is helicopter money. And credit to Larry Summers for saying you're going to get inflation out of this. Well, Biden comes into office in January 2021, and he's like, not to be outdone, he did his own COVID relief package. That was another $2 trillion. And that's when we all got the $1,400 checks. They just handed them out. And then later that year, I think late 2021, early 2022, they did the $1 trillion infrastructure package. And then just to top it off, what we get recently was the just under $1 trillion Green New Deal. I call it the Green New Scam. Well, and the baseline budget deficit, before everything I just described, the baseline budget deficit was about $1 trillion a year. So take $1 trillion for 2020, 2021, okay, and 2022. Add on, $2 trillion for Trump's first package, $1 trillion for his second one, $2 trillion for Biden's first package, $1 trillion for the Green New Scam, and I think $1 trillion for infrastructure. That's $7 trillion on top of the $2 trillion baseline budget deficit. So that's $9 trillion piled on top of what was at the time about a $21 trillion national debt. So that's how we got to 30 trillion. That's how the ratio went from 106 to 131. These numbers are mind-boggling, and MMT says doesn't matter. But it does matter, and it shows up the way I described earlier, which is it slows growth. You don't get growth. So best case for the U.S. is very slow, weak growth, which we saw from 2009 to 2019. Worst case is you throw a recession on top of that, which we're heading for, and the U.S. will be in fiscal distress.
So the Fed can destroy demand, but only at the cost of the economy. It's one thing if the inflation is coming from the demand side, but it's not. It's coming from the supply side, and the Fed can't do anything about that. They can destroy enough demand to maybe bring inflation down, but only by destroying the economy. And that's the point. The idea that the Fed can squash inflation without squashing the economy is false. I'm afraid we're going to find that out the hard way, said Jim Rickards. America is about to go down to its lowest in history. We always appreciate your opinions in these matters. Do well to drop your comments, like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Thanks for watching.